So for those who have been here many times before, this is probably a little bit redundant, so apologies, and we'll go through it fairly quickly. Just so you're aware, you probably noticed when you came in, we do record, so that recording should already be on. Clicked on right when we joined the call. We will typically trim the first kind of general discussion out, and then it gets posted to the Doug YouTube. The content itself and any sort of discussion around the content will get posted to the Doug YouTube channel. And so just keep in mind that we're recording. You're encouraged to engage and ask questions and stuff. You can use chat, or you can put your hand up, and Ashley or the presenter will call that out and go from there. But you are encouraged to listen in if you wish, or participate rather. So today, network and chat, we just kind of did the Doug intro, which I'll do very quickly here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, who we're thrilled to have here. Although, Ashley, I'm very sorry to hear that you're not feeling great, but thank you for being here regardless. And so survival tips for CRM admins, real world tricks to stay sane and succeed. I wish I had listened to that session before I lost all my hair. And then we'll do a quick debrief before we wrap up. And the debrief is really just conversation and discussion. Encourage you to share your LinkedIn profiles and connect via chat for those who aren't already connected. The whole premise of this, I mean, Ashley and I can speak to this, and actually Robert and I too, and several people here. I mean, I know these people because of events like this and interacting in this kind of forum. So people I would consider friends of mine who live all over the world now as a result of coming to things like this. So please take advantage of the time and engage. Share, connect with each other, because it's all about building a good connection with people to grow your network and have resources of people around you, which is always nice. Nice to have a community around you. Housekeeping stuff is pretty straightforward. I never see any issues with this, but of course, let's make sure that we're being respectful, and in our dialogue, it's okay to disagree with each other. That's totally fine, but let's do so in a respectful, courteous manner. Join the meetup group today. You can scan the QR code to do that. And then when you're not speaking, please use the mute function just so we're not getting any weird background noise. We will kind of monitor that. If it happens, we may throw you on mute if you are coming off mute and to say something and then there was background noise or something, and while you're waiting to speak, we might throw you back on mute. So just pay attention to that, just to keep things not sounding tinny. Couple of meeting dates coming up. So we try to meet this group. We try to meet monthly, usually the second Tuesday of the month around this time. And so we've got some open slots. We've got January and February. We've got a speaker lined up for March. I got another one. We're going to slot in somewhere into one of these dates. We're just kind of working on what works best for availability. But if you have ideas and you'd like to fulfill the picture image here on screen and have you be there, we'd love to have you here. If you've never presented before and you're like, no, I couldn't do that, but I kind of would like to try, please reach out. We would love to work with you. It could be even like a 30-minute session that we could co-present with you and help kind of get you over the hurdle of nerves if you're nervous speaking or anything like that. Or if you have an idea and you're like, it's only half baked, what do I do? I mean, we're here to talk about Microsoft applications. We all know that's how they roll. They half bake everything and then roll it out. So if your presentation's half baked, you're just going to fit right in. And so let's go that path. If you're uncertain about anything in that regard, if you'd like to present, please reach out. We would love to work with you to help get that in place. There's a bunch of different communities out there. So these are some of the links that you can see if any of these jump out at you and you'd like to link. I think these are hot links through the screen, but I'm not actually probably not because I'm not presenting from Teams. But if you'd like any of these, let me know. I can carve them out and get them over to you. You can just do a quick search as well. There's a number of dead communities and lots of just general community forums for people to engage and interact with each other. So I encourage you to do that if you have an opportunity. Share your ideas. So this is a forum. We get live updates as people submit items. So if you have content that you'd just like to see, maybe you're not comfortable presenting, that's fine. But you're like, it would be really great if we could see something on this topic. By all means, submit it. If you have, even better, if you have content that you're like, yeah, I'd love to be happy to presentate. If you'd be happy to presentate, that would be great. If you want to present, you could submit the session and tell us what you want to present, and then we'll look at the dates we have coming up and see if we can't find one that aligns for all of us. That would be awesome. Quick overview. So we weren't able to be joined by the Doug team.
And
they are.
Can I ask a quick question about?
Of course. Yeah, please.
I'm sorry. Do we have anything that's been requested from the community that needs to be filled in?
Yeah, there have been a few that I'll go into the forum
Okay.
once Ashley gets started, and I'll throw it in the chat. I think I know there was two in there a while back that came in, and I know that we had sessions around those topics. One was marketing related, and one, I think they were both actually CIJ, customer insights journeys related. One was moving from real time to whatever the move was. I forget the language that we use around that. That was one of them, and there was, I think, just a general overview of CIJ stuff. But I will jump into the forum and check if
Okay.
there's anything. Good question. Doug team is down in Miami, enjoying the snow down at Convergence. So we said we would cover these slides. So again, I think most of you have been here before. So if you're not familiar with Doug or the Dynamics user group, that's the hosts of DynamicsCon as the annual conference. And then they do a lot of work in terms of local community meetups and groups and things like that are happening. So they are big supporters of us. And what we're doing today is a Doug meetup. And so if you're not familiar with them, we'd encourage you to look them up at the website noted there. They've got a whole forum. In fact, there's a slide in here I'm going to touch on in a minute that kind of shows you all the different offerings. They got tons of stuff going on. So lots of cool stuff there if you're looking to engage in the community. Just a little overview on rules of engagement. We kind of already covered this, but just, being respectful and please, if you're a partner, please don't be here trying to pitch or sell your services or anything like that. We're here to embrace community and share community knowledge. It's great if anybody can present, but we ask that you do so in a respectful way. This is the slide I was referring to. So lots of cool stuff that they've got going on. They've got online forums and they've got different meetups happening. They do some in-person stuff. I know they're doing some regional conferences, which I believe is the next slide. They cover a swath of different applications. Some of them meetups are more generic and some are more targeted and laser focused on specific applications. I mentioned DynamicsCon is a big event. So that happening in Vegas next year, which is super exciting. Or at least for some people. Some people are like, oh man, not Vegas again. Some people have never been to Vegas, and so I hope to get to go there someday. Also, DynamicsCon regionals are another big thing. So they have had a handful of those every year, and they're trying to amp up and do more and more. So those are great physical in-person events as well that are super fun to go to. Smaller scale of DynamicsCon, but same concept where you have sessions and things like that from people. And then there's things like this, local meetups. Some meetups do meet in person, some do virtual. We are exclusively virtual here with exception to the regional conferences, but we do these virtual sessions just to kind of bring people together and share information and connect with one another. So lots of good stuff on that. I encourage you to check out their webpage. As you can see, there is a registration. So there is a 15% discount with the code below, CA15. So if you use that, then you'll get a 15% discount. And note that the early bird price is in effect until the end of December. So it is hard to believe, but it is December 11th. So 20 more days, and that code, or that price rather, will jump up a little bit because we're at an early bird. So if you're thinking about going, I would encourage you to go. If you've never been, any of these events are fantastic opportunities to connect with other people and build. We talked earlier about building a network, and so great place to do just that. They are looking for call for sessions, so also closes on the 31st of the month. So if you haven't seen this, scan this now. If you have session ideas, sorry, let me move the. Hold on. I know that's probably interfering with the QR code. If it is, oh, there we go. If you have session ideas, even if they're half-baked, I would encourage you to put them in because they'll start to review and pick what they're going to have at the conference. My philosophy is if you have a great session idea, it's one thing to get it picked up, it's another thing to put it together. So get it picked up first, and then you can worry about putting it together. If you're like many presenters, maybe even the week of the event, you'll kind of scramble to get things put together. But always good sessions and always lots of good content at these events. So put things in there now if you have ideas of what you might want to present. Some of the regionals that are coming up. So we've got Southeast in Tampa, we got one in Vancouver, one in Denver, and one in Toronto. So you can see the dates there. If you're looking for details on any of those, the Doug website should have them. Some of them may not have details posted yet because things are still in the planning stages, but they are at least working to confirm if they haven't already confirmed that these are the ones that are going to happen at specific spaces in those cities. Oh, and even more. I didn't even know this was a slide. Africa, Ohio, Montreal. So Canada getting on the bandwagon of regionals here. We got 3 of them. Europe and Texas in Houston. Awesome. So lots of stuff going on, lots of regionals happening. And on tap today is Ashley. So Ashley and I have known each other for many, many years. She is a solution architect over at PS Hummingbird. And so Ashley's here to talk to us about survival tips for CRM admins. And Ashley, I will hand it over to you, and you can run with today's content whenever you're ready.
Okay, awesome. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Richard has his hand up.
Oh, good catch. Sorry, didn't see that. Richard.
Yeah, no, just before we hand it over to Ashley, if anyone live today or on the recording wants to know a little bit more around outbound marketing, real-time journeys, we did a session in April 2024 about the comparison there and things to consider, especially when you're moving from one to the other. I put the link in the chat. Alternatively, if you're online watching this later, you can go to the YouTube channel and just look at the National CRM meetup for April 25th, 2024, and the recording's right there for you.
Excellent. Good call out. Thank you, Richard.
Pleasure.
All right, Ashley, over to you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thanks, Richard. I think that that's a good reminder to folks that there is so much great content out there among the community, and that's not even just through Doug. I mean, YouTube and people are contributing their own content, things like that. So that's a great reminder. I'm glad you put that into the chat. So like Malcolm said, we're here today to talk about survival tips for CRM admins. So getting into, I love when the screen doesn't go forward. So just some highlights about like what we're going to be covering today. We're going to be talking about how admins can prevent fires, talking about how the people and the process matter most. It's not the technology that is the most important. It's really about who you're working with and how they work. And then how you can use automation and the community to make your life easier as an admin. As an admin, you tend to be the only person that knows what you do in an organization. As somebody who is an admin for, I think, 10, 11 years at internal clients, most people don't know what you're doing. They don't know the level of effort, and that's kind of why the community is here. We are here to support each other, and honestly, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the community and reaching out to other people that knew what I was going through and could offer advice. So just things that we're going to be talking about high level. Here's the agenda. I have broken up the content into these 5 different categories of what an admin does with their role. So the first one is stopping a fire before it starts, designing and configuring. We're also going to talk a little bit about requirements gathering, because as an admin, you do have to do your own requirements gathering. We're going to talk about people and data and how they interact together. We're going to talk about automating and how to stay sane in your role. That is obviously in the title. And then how to level up with your learning and the community. So we're going to circle back and we're going to end with the community, kind of like how we started. I wanted to just highlight this section, or this, like, who is this session for? I think it's pretty obvious that it's for CRM admins, right? It's in the title, but I do think that there is benefit with other types of roles as well, right? There is a lot of overlap with the roles in our industry. And so things that a CRM admin does, other roles at consultants, consultants have, or partners, there's a lot of shared talent there. So part of this, so I would say this session is in addition beneficial for business and systems analysts, project managers, and product owners, and then also your power users. So we're going to talk about what power users are and how you can use them as a CRM admin. But don't be afraid to share this content with people that are in other roles than just a CRM admin. And just an introduction to myself, why do I feel like I'm qualified to talk on this topic? I've been working with Dynamics 365. I call it CRM back from the OG days, since version 4.0, but I have worked as an CRM admin for over, I guess it says here, over 11 years. And so I feel like I can pull from, I've been in those trenches, right? I've done it, I've been there, I can relate. And so I feel like I can really, work with, really relate to the work that an admin does. I live in Dallas. If you guys were here for the chit chat before the call, but I am from the Midwest. You might hear the Wisconsin accent as I talk. So just that explains that. Definitely don't talk like a Southerner. I co-host a podcast with my friend Ed Gonzalez. There's a QR code there if you want to navigate to that podcast. We talk all things Power Platform, Dynamics, the real world, life, how to work. I mean, we kind of talk about anything and everything. And it's just, we talk on a regular basis and thought we would hit record and see if people enjoy it. Like Malcolm said, I'm a solution architect at PS Hummingbird. I am also a Microsoft MVP. And I always think it's good to kind of get to know people on a personal level, right? Like, even though this is a professional environment, we're people, we should get to know each other. So my hobbies are watching documentaries, Netflix, HBO Max. I've probably seen every one that's out there. If you have recommendations, would love to take it. I love learning more about history and the world and anything. I've watched a documentary on how buttons are made. So crazy things I would love to watch. I also hang out with my nephews. That's one of the reasons I moved to Texas is I have 3 nephews and love to be a part of their lives. And then everything to do with the Milwaukee Brewers. I'm a big baseball fan. If I was sharing my camera, sorry, I'm not. I have a bunch of baseball stuff behind me. So really that's kind of takes up most of my life during those baseball months. And I don't know if anyone's in Toronto, but I was really rooting for y'all's Blue Jays in the World Series because that would have been really cool. So all right, so let's talk about CRM admins. So what are admins? They're really an unsung hero, right? They work behind the scenes. They don't get a lot of praise. They're not seen on the front side. They're not they're not somebody that has a lot of face time in front of the organization. But they really make sure things are running behind the scenes. As an admin, I would be taking calls at 5 a.m. on a Saturday because salespeople on the East Coast needed to put in their activities for the week. But nobody ever saw that. Nobody knew that, but I was helping them, meet their goals and things like that. So it's really a role that not a lot of people recognize. So what are the core responsibilities of an admin? Really, you just need to keep the system up and running smoothly and make it easy to use. Make sure that your salespeople, your service folks, whoever's in the system can use the system, make sure that there's, it's easy to use, that there's not error messages, things like that. Handle daily user questions and resolve issues. If there is an error message or somebody just can't figure out how to close an opportunity, you're there to help them do that. Data quality is a huge part of being an admin. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down and was like, okay, I'm going to run a deduplication project. And like months later, I'm still like merging records together because people don't check to see if something's already there. But maintaining that data quality is very important. Managing the security roles and user access. So making sure that people have the correct access into the system. And then also driving post go live success with making sure the system is updated. Obviously, we all know that Microsoft releases 2 waves a year. So making sure that you are opting into the right things as part of that upgrade to keep your users, up to date and taking advantage of those things, but also training them on how to do those. And training is not a one and done, right? It's not just as we go live and here you go. It's an ongoing thing. So jumping into our categories, one of the biggest things as an admin is I always like to say that I was a firefighter, right? I was putting out fires. I was calming down salespeople. And one of the things that I always tried to focus on is how do I try to prevent the fires before they start? So how can I really stay ahead of those daily issues and try to really make sure that, that less calls for me, right? So understanding the Microsoft technical requirements, knowing what the product can and cannot do is huge. I'm not encouraging you by any means to read every single document on Microsoft Learn because that would be impossible. But knowing the pieces of the system that you're using and knowing what the capabilities are and how far you can extend it is really important. Also validate the documentation that you're reading. I've put in here in bold, bad guides equals big problems. If you are, especially if you're using something like Copilot or ChatGPT, you do have to validate that the information is correct. And then also don't rush a go live if your sales team is not ready. And a go live could be anything, right? It could be a wave update. It could be rolling out the forecasting feature in the system. It could be, all sorts of different, anything new that's in the system. If your team is not ready for it, don't rush it. At the end of the day, it's going to hurt adoption. And Malcolm, you're hilarious. I always say, I'm like, oh, I'm so sick of the word Copilot. But it's not going anywhere, unfortunately. So we're going to keep hearing it. The next thing is to build smart. I always say hire an admin if your workload is growing. I think we all come from this world of like a partial admin, or some of us, I shouldn't say all. I come from this world of a partial admin where I was split between marketing and being a CRM admin, and eventually it just became 2 full-time jobs, right? So I was doing 40 hours with marketing and I was doing 40 hours of CRM admin work. So if you are doing a partial admin, or if nobody is maintaining the system, it's time to hire an admin. Never build in production. It's one of the things I always tell people. Move things through a dev or a sandbox environment and preserve the out of the box components. I think this is, I don't know if, I think this is just something that comes from experience. Everyone I talk to that's been in this industry for a while, they don't edit like the out of the box forms or the security roles. We always take like a copy of it and then edit that. Microsoft does make changes to their, the out of the box stuff that could potentially overwrite what you've done. And so it's always been, kind of best practice to edit, to copy and then edit those, the copies of those. If somebody has a different perspective now and that doesn't happen, please let me know. But one of the biggest things that I could say is trying not to use those default forms and apps and things like that. Also, spot red flags. If you have a poor adoption, that probably means that there's something wrong with the system. If you have poor documentation, there's something wrong with the system, right? That's something, people are going to come to you with questions instead of going to any sort of the videos or things that you've put out. And then heavy vendor alliance. And I say this as somebody who now works at a partner. This is kind of where I think my experience as an admin and then now working at a partner kind of it kind of conflicts, right? But you want to be able to support your system. Nobody's going to know your business better than an internal employee, right? A partner can do the best that they can, but it's also great to have somebody dedicated to work with that partner, to help them, to engage them. It's great to have someone internal to do that. And then if you're spending 20 to 30 hours a week on admin activity, you need a full-time admin, because that means that there's probably work that they're not doing because they do have a full-time job. But you can't plan for everything. So when a fire does happen, the first thing, is don't panic. If you panic, the users are going to panic. So make sure that you calmly respond. You assess the situation first. The first thing that you should always do is check if the issue is isolated or if it's widespread. If it's happening to just one user, it might be user error. But if you are hearing the same issue from multiple people, then clearly it's going to be a widespread issue and that would hit, a higher priority. I would always encourage also people to retry or have like a peer also try, educate them and like say, hey, try it again, or ask your coworker to try it. Do they get the same error message? I always like to say, if it doesn't seem like a large issue, I wait a while to respond, because usually it's just something didn't work the first time and they just email you instead of doing it correctly. And they're like, oh, I figured it out. So I always like to wait and see if they figure it out on their own plan, because that's the best way for them to learn. Also with quick wins, so things that you can do to prevent those fires is build smarter. So try to reduce as much custom code as possible. I'm not saying don't use custom code. There is a great way to implement it and to use it. And there are some things that you can only do with custom code. But if you can use out of the box things like calculated columns, power effects, business rules, things that are supported in the system that are provided from Microsoft, use them when and where possible. Also, keep your forms lean, minimize the required fields. Honestly, because if the more fields you require, the more junk data you're going to get, because your salespeople, your service people are just going to fill in the field so they can save the record. So it's really try to keep those forms lean and always keep the most important fields on that front page. If you hide a required field on a tab that's like the 7th tab in, it's going to frustrate your users. Streamline your support, create a template for issue reporting. And I don't put here how to create that template because there are so many different ways, depending on your business, how large you are, the different systems that you have, that you can create a template for issue reporting. I've worked, I've done SharePoint lists, right? Where, they just go into SharePoint, create like a little item and it alerts me that there's a list. I've created my own records or used cases inside of CRM. I would say whatever you do, do not use email. One, because there's no sort of tracking of like when it came in, when you saw it, what the troubleshooting was in any other sort of system. Even Excel is better than email, right? So have an shared Excel spreadsheet where people can put things in. So definitely create a way for people to report issues. Also train your users on how to report an issue. There is nothing worse than getting a screenshot of just like a tiny part of the form and the user's like, this doesn't work. And you're like, okay, well, what form are you on? Where are you? What stage of the process are you in? So really train them on, how to take screenshots, because a lot of salespeople don't know how to take screenshots, to provide you the steps, any error logs that come up, even maybe videos. Train your users on how to report those issues. And if they don't send it to you that way, respond and say, hey, here are the things that I need, to really troubleshoot this the right way. And they'll go back to their training and say, oh yeah, I need it too. Make sure you ask clarifying questions, because sometimes just asking questions reveals what the problem is and it'll resolve the issue. And then I love this one because this is like a typical IT response, like, oh, have you restarted your computer? Have you tried unplugging it and plugging it back in? But sometimes, unfortunately, that does work, right? Sometimes you just need to close your browser, try it again. Maybe you need to clear your cache. Maybe you're using Firefox instead of Edge or Chrome. You never know what people are using. So those simple, basic troubleshooting always helps as well. And then use your tools. Salespeople like to do things crazy. They like to delete records. For example, I had a salesperson delete every single one of their future activities because it synced to their Outlook. And so they just deleted all of their tasks. So we're talking tasks that were like 2 to 3 years in the future to follow up for a renewal or things like that, and just deleted every single one because we allow them to delete their own personal activities for obvious reasons. Something like the recycle bin is great because you can recover deleted records. I hear that Microsoft is actually putting a new feature into the system where you can recover deleted records. I don't know if it's out there for testing yet. I hear it's coming. But the recycle bin is there today to recover those deleted items, and it does work on any table that you are auditing. So the other XRM, there's 2 more XRM tools that I think are great for an admin is the bulk updater. So if you add a new field and you need to make a quick mass update, you can do that through the bulk updater. Or if you need to run a workflow, maybe whatever the case may be, right? You need to create activities for something, or you need to automate something. You can run a workflow against thousands of records at one time in the bulk updater, and it'll do it over time so that it doesn't slow down the system. And then also the model-driven app copier. I love this one. I tell everybody about it. Depending on your business, you might have multiple custom apps. Building an app from scratch to make it look like everything else, but then just edit the views and the forms is terrible. Use the model-driven app copier and it'll duplicate the apps as is, and then you just need to edit from there. And then also for troubleshooting, using a tool like Level Up. If you haven't used it, it's a browser extension available both in Chrome and in Edge. And it has a bunch of different cool features. We could talk an hour just about all the cool features in there. But the impersonation tool, I think, is the most important as an admin, because you can actually impersonate a user and try to replicate the issue or the error that they're having without being like having to call them and be like, okay, can you reproduce the steps? You know, can you show me the error? You can actually walk through the steps and try to see if you can replicate it, impersonating them. All right, so next let's get into planning, designing, and configuring. So as an admin, you also are the person in the system enhancing it, adding in new features, you know, taking those requirements, understanding what people need. So always gather requirements before building. I think it's funny to say that out loud, but you don't just go build in the system if somebody's like, hey, I need to capture this data. All right, I'm just going to go create a field. No, ask some questions. What are you going to use the data for? You know, when do you need to know that data? Who's going to know that information? And that'll help you really understand what to build in the system. Again, I put business rules in here because I think it's really important to try to avoid code when possible. You got to use JavaScript when necessary, but really try to use those business rules for conditional logic. And then also use business process flows. No salesperson wants to enter in 20 required fields on an opportunity, but as they move through the stages or, you know, working through that opportunity, there's more data and information that they're going to need to know in order to close. A business process flow is a great way to require fields as they go through the process. So to them, it seems like there's only a couple of required fields because they're only filling in a couple as they go through the whole opportunity. That works also great for customer service as they work through a case. Also use some of these, I would say, overlooked features. The Power Apps grid control is a really cool one because you can turn on editable grids. It basically turns everything into an Excel spreadsheet, which we all know salespeople love Excel spreadsheets. You can also use color coding. I actually recently did this on a project where we were tracking projects and we just built a table for it. But they were like, we just want to see like on the front screen what's on time, what's approved, and we want to make it really obvious. And so we used color coding and then just assigned, okay, obviously if something's on time, it's in green, and if it's behind schedule, it's in red. And so it just created a really cool way to be able to see the information just really easily at a glance, not having to like, you know, really dive into each record. And then emojis. People always forget this. You can put an emoji into a field, like into a drop-down list or a field. It's really cool. So make it fun, make it interactive, depending on your user. You know, this stuff might make more sense to them. Use a calculated and roll-up fields to eliminate manual math. Power Effects is also a great way to do that. Just as a non-coder, I tend to lean towards the calculated and roll-up fields. But the last thing a salesperson wants to do is go through all the invoices and add them up. And then also you can configure the help button inside of Dynamics to link to your custom documentation. So right now it goes out to Microsoft Learn, but you can actually change where that goes, and you can have it go to where, you know, maybe you have a SharePoint site where all of this information is, or maybe you have a team. You've created a team site where all of this great stuff is. You can actually link to that directly within the system. You can also impress people with, you know, there are some really cool things out there. I love to use the attribute usage inspector because managers always want to add more data points. Hey, add this to the system, add this to the system. You know, I want to know this information. You can pull this and say, hey, remember last time we did this? Only 2% of your sales team is actually filling in the new fields that you added last time. Like, what's the benefit of adding more? So that's another XRM toolbox tool. Stay current with the new Dynamics and Power Platform features. So now that Dynamics is actually essentially just a model-driven app Power App, you will want to reference all of the Power Platform features because anything that's related to Power Apps will also relate to Dynamics. And then this is actually a really cool one that I don't think a lot of people know, but there is just this out-of-the-box free D365 Sales Power BI dashboard. I'll put in the comments, or maybe I'll put, you know, with the link or whatever. I'll make sure you guys get the link to it. But all you have to do is like do a basic connection between your environment and Power BI and enable the dashboard, and it's completely free. And it does some really cool stuff, and it'll impress your salespeople. So if you don't know that it's there, we did this a couple of like last year on a project, and the client loved it. So really simple, free, and you don't have to build anything. Also with planning, designing, and configuring, you always want to make sure that you think of CRM as a product, right? This is not a one and done. you're not going to just have it sit there and make no additional changes to it. Think about it in terms of having a roadmap. Where is it going to go? What do you want it to do? The last thing you want to do is launch a CRM system and then make no changes to it. You want to continue to enhance it and make sure that it's staying up with like the new features, because that might make your users happier and it might make their jobs easier. Adopt a backlog prioritization and release cadence. I think one of the biggest things is getting stakeholders involved to prioritize what gets added into the system. As your users ask for things, you can create a backlog of all of those requests and then go to stakeholders and say, hey, what's most important? And then always ask why before building. If somebody asks you to add a field, like, why? Why do you need that field? Because maybe what they're looking for can actually be gathered from a different part of the system rather than adding a new field. So why is the best question to ask after you get a requirement from someone. You want to make sure that you stay simple when you are designing. Build for the rule, not the exception. I always say the exceptions can start out manual, right? If you build to every single exception that can happen in a business, one, your system is going to be so complex that nobody will know how to use it or maintain it, and it probably will overlap and break. So make sure that you're building like the 80-20, right? So we're going to build to 80% of how the process works, and then the 20%, it might be manual for a short period of time, and maybe we can consolidate some of that 20% and make a little bit of it automated, but it's going to become very complex really fast if you try to build for every exception that's out there. Again, keep your forms lean, use the tabs and sections effectively. Don't put a required field on the 7th tab. It's a great way to make your users mad. And then again, talk about business rules. You always want to try to favor an out-of-the-box tool over custom code when possible. Make sure that you think about the way that your solutions are going to be implemented. Man, I can't tell you how many times I've had solution issues where they're like overriding each other and things like that. So you'll want to make sure that you think about, as you develop and your partner develops and you have other developers, think about how your solutions, how they layer with each other. Use great naming conventions. Name things what they are. Don't make it up for interpretation. This is probably one of my favorite pieces of advice for people, is using a joiner table over a many-to-many relationship. Many relationships are great. You can relate things to each other in all sorts of fashion, but it is more difficult to report on, and you can't capture any additional information. I think event and event attendee is the easiest example, right? It would be great to be able to connect a contact to as many events as possible, but how would you then know, what their dietary restrictions are, or ask any of these other questions? So to connect those, you put this joiner table in the middle of an event attendee. So on that event attendee, you have the event, you have the contact, and then you have all these other details that you need to know about that person attending the event. So it's a great way to create a type of many relationship and gather more information. And then only automate when scalable. It's great to automate things, but what happens on the next wave? What happens on the next update? What happens when you gather the next requirement? You want to make sure that you're automating in a way that can grow with new features and the product. I think designing and configuring is one of the biggest parts of being a CRM admin. So I do have additional just like tips and best practices in here. So obviously with the form and the views, make sure it's clean and intuitive. One of my biggest pet peeves is when people put in a view that first column is a lookup, but it's a lookup to a different table than the one you're in. So let's say like you're listing the contacts, but you put the account in that first column. When you click on that first column, it's going to open the account, not the contact. Biggest pet peeve. And it's going to annoy your users. You also want to think about the solution architecture. Really make sure that you think about those layered solutions, naming conventions, standardize, your tables, your columns, the solutions. You want to make it very clear what things are. Also think about when you can use out of the box versus custom code features, and then also document. And document can be as simple as an ADO, right? It can be a PBI, it can be a user story. You don't have to write pages and pages. We're kind of past the days of having like a 70-page Word document of all of the customizations that we've done. If you are still doing that, please try to think of other better ways to track, because that's not always the best way to be able to look back and see what happens. But find a way to document what's changing and why you changed it. It's going to be a great thing for the future, so you can go back and say, oh, this is why we did this, and now we need to undo it, whatever the case may be. And then also just some best practices is you want to build a solid foundation. You want to think about, what does that bottom look like? What is what is the base of the system in order before you start to build on top of it. And then, yeah, so just kind of summarizes the last. I'm going to pause here. I get really excited about CRM and Dynamics, and I'm kind of a nerd. I talk really fast and just keep going. So I'm going to pause. Are there any questions or comments from the group? All right, I'll keep going. So next we want to talk about people and data, two things that you always have to have your mind on as a CRM admin. The first thing is you need to keep your users happy and secure, right? You need to keep them, not frustrated. That's a really easy thing to happen to a user, is get frustrated if the system doesn't work for them, if it's not logical, or if there's terrible data in the system, right? So the first thing you want to do is you want to train. The first thing that happens is when you have any sort of project or implementation, it's so easy to cut training. Please do not cut training. It happens all the time, but it is a surefire way to have a poor adoption is to cut training. You really want to make sure that you train the users how to use it, why the system is built the way it is, and it really will, carry on forward and really help them understand the system. Also think about change management. So I have like onboarding strategy matters. You want people to embrace the change. Change is scary. Change is hard. We live in this world now where things change every day, right? Copilot and ChatGPT came out overnight, right? None of us were expecting that. And we all had to change, and it was scary. Now think about something in the system changes and it could potentially impact your paycheck, right? That's scary. So you always want to make sure that you're thinking about the change and how to introduce that to your users. I love creating these ambassador programs. As an admin, I was supporting up to 500 users at one time. That's a lot of people. So creating those power users or champions and training them on how to troubleshoot or, additional features in the system, maybe on how to create dashboards and views so people are not asking you to do that, is a great thing. And then those people, it's great to put on their resume, but also it empowers them, to be seen as a leader among their team. Empathy is probably one of the most important things you need to have as a CRM admin. I always like to say that I am a very impatient person. I grew up, that is something that God did not bless me with, is I do not have patience. But as a CRM admin, I learned how to be patient because you're going to have a wide variety of people that are going to call you. And empathy is so important because you really need to understand their situation. To you, it might seem easy, right? You don't understand why this is so difficult for people, but you've really got to put yourself in their shoes and say, okay, if I was this person, I was out on the road and the app wasn't downloading for me, how would I feel? So really making sure that you're understanding their situation and putting yourself in their shoes is so important. You don't want to judge them. You don't want to, not try to understand. You also want to connect with business leaders and IT leaders. You want to really bridge that gap between those different departments and really build trust between them. And not everything that people request are going to happen. You're not going to add every field that gets asked for. You're not going to add every form, every table. And just saying no can turn people off, right? It makes people a little combative. It makes them upset. So try to learn how to say not right now tactfully. Don't say no, just be like, hey, you know what? Not right now, but let's keep that on the table and, discuss it for later. Or, hey, let's loop that in with, this other person. Saying no can sometimes really shut down a conversation and turn off your users. The next thing is empowering your users. You want to teach them on how to self-check. So again, that's the training on how to report, clear your cache, restart your browser, all of those various things before they come to you. Also encourage those detailed reporting. So whether it's screenshots, the steps to reproduce the issue, and then again, ask clarifying questions of your users. Data is also very important. Your users and data are probably the two things that are going to take up the most of your time. So avoid over required fields. People are just going to enter junk to save it because they just want to move on with their day. Also build for clarity. When you are gathering requirements from people, let them talk. Don't interrupt them. Let them overshare. Let them tell you things that you think have nothing to do with what they are asking for or what you need, because you never know what you're going to find in that overshare. They might start talking about a different problem, and you can identify this issue and be like, well, actually, this is deeper than what you're asking for. And you never would have known that if you would have cut them off and said, okay, now I have what I need. So let people talk, let them overshare, let them tell you their life story. You really want to make sure that you're listening to them and letting them tell you everything that they want to say. Also make sure that you have oversight over the entire environment. You might have people in other departments like customer service, sales, marketing that are kind of maintaining their own areas and doing training. As an admin, you're overseeing the entire system. And so you want to make sure that you have a broad view of how the entire system works to make sure that all those teams are working together efficiently and that you're not duplicating processes. Another great way to know if your data is good is adoption. If people are not using the system, it might be because they don't trust the data. And so it's, and so they're not going to, use the system because they can't trust what's in there. Great way to do that is obviously integrating between systems. Have a data advocate, somebody whose job is to just validate data, check data. It's becoming more and more popular. Or build an agent, right? I saw somebody in the comments earlier say, hey, we want to talk about some sales agents. That would be awesome in a future one of these meetings. Build an agent to start checking data and merging things together. Be pretty cool. I would love to hear about it if you do that. And then also using the right tools to maintain your data. If as you are going live, you're probably going to put your data into a lower environment like a dev or a sit environment first. Use the data transporter to then move that data up to higher environments, especially when you're using a table. For example, let's say instead of having state be freeform, you're having it go to a lookup table because you don't want people to misspell Texas, or in y'all's case, probably a province, right? You don't want them to misspell that. And so you create a table called state. Well, you want all of those records to have the same GUID from environment to environment. It's going to make things a lot simpler down the road. So use the data transporter to move those records from environment to environment, and then it will make data migrations a lot easier in the future. There are ISV tools out there for validation and deduplication. Data 8 is one that I've used in the past. I know there's some other really great ones out there. Definitely, if you have a huge data problem, it might be worth looking into an ISV to try to clean up those issues. Another thing that ISV solutions can do is validate an email or an address. They could even just ping to see if that email address exists. Not necessarily that it'll deliver, but is that an email that even exists out in the world? Or with the address, they can do an address lookup rather than requiring the user to enter it. All right, let's talk about automation and how to stay sane as an admin. I think that's I think that was in the title, right, of this, is how to stay sane. So first off, automate smart. You want to use business rules and Power Automate to create logic in the system and try to take away some of those manual processes, but not only for the user, but for you as well, right? As an admin, you can't do everything manually. You need to think about how you can automate some of the jobs. So automate common tasks for your user, whatever the case may be, but also think about yourself, or if you're creating users, if you're assigning security roles, can you use teams and groups inside of M365 to do some of that? For stability, you always want to create, you also always want to design with upgrades in mind. You want to think about how the system is going to develop, read those notes of the release planner of what's coming. I actually did read every page of the last release plan because I had a presentation. I would not recommend that for anybody. Please never read every single page. But I mean, really pay attention to the different pieces that you're using, and then always test the automation before you roll out. And then I have there the reduce the manual effort. This is for you as an admin. try to auto disable inactive users, auto assign security roles. If you need to add people to teams, there's a way to create Power Automate flows to do some of that for you, or you can use some of the M365 tools to do that. All right, so some things that will help save your sanity, and there's actually 2 slides on this because I think this is really important. As a CRM admin, I would say it was very frustrating because nobody knew what you were doing, right? And that's why I joined the community, is there were other people that knew what I was going through. So here are some things that will potentially save you from getting as frustrated as I used to. Is don't forget that you might need a project manager. It is very hard to be the admin doing the delivery and also project managing your meetings, the timelines, the stakeholders. So thinking about the size of the project, it's okay to get an internal PM for an internal CRM admin project. Don't be afraid to ask for it. Also, if you are working with a partner, you should have an internal PM. Don't rely on the partner solely to project manage the project, right? Because they're thinking about, their resources, their timing. They're not thinking about yours, right? If you're pulling in salespeople to do testing, or if you need to pull in stakeholders to get alignment on processes, you're going to want an internal PM to fight for you. Also, asking, oh gosh, I'm so sorry, that is a misspell that I will fix. Asking an internal system, getting an internal owner of the system, you don't want to rely on a consultant full-time to admin your environment. Also, you want to document your requirements and then share them. After you document it, share it with everybody and make sure that they are on board with what you've documented. You want to keep standards across the whole system. You can also add functionality over time. You don't need to release everything at one time. You can phase out the enhancements. It also allows for easier adoption because if you do change over time, it's less for people to have to change to. So it's a great way to help your adoption. You also want to delegate as much as possible. If you're the only person that knows what you're doing inside of a company, that you're the one person for everything. So make sure that you delegate as much as possible, train those power users, use some automation. I always say, I say this, but I heard this as I was coming into the industry. If you're doing a task that either takes a lot of time or a lot of repetition, there's probably something in the XRM toolbox that can make that faster. I love the XRM toolbox. I probably use it almost every day. Even as a consultant, I use it every day. So make sure that it'll become your best friend. It's something that you're definitely going to want to use. Also create templates for responses. So as people reach out, have an automated response like, thank you for this, I'll be reaching out to you, or, hey, you've submitted a request for the system. Please go to this SharePoint list and add it here, that kind of thing. And then there are some diagnostics inside of the system to help you find some issues. One is the solution checker with your solutions. It'll tell you if something's missing or if something will error out when you import it. It's a great tool. And then you also have your performance insights or how people are using the system. How to drive adoption. I loved offering office hours. So especially when you're releasing a new feature. So just put 30 minutes on everyone's calendar once a week, 3 times a week, whatever you think is going to be beneficial for your users, and just open up the time. Let people ask questions. And if people just want to come and they don't have any questions, they just want to hear more information, have a topic ready. Hey, here's how you can automate creating your activities, or here's how you can easily attach, documents from an email to a record, things like that. And then also offer refreshers, things like that. Training is not a one-time thing. It is an ongoing process. You are going to train over time and you're going to retrain and you're going to talk about the same things over and over because people forget. If they're not doing it every day, they're going to forget it. You're in this every day. So of course you're going to remember and you're going to think it's easy. But again, remember, this goes back to empathy, is they're not in the system as often as you. So you're going to want to retrain on topics that you've already trained, and it gets boring and terrible, but you got to do it. Also encourage collaboration. One of the things that I had started to do as an admin was create a team within Teams. I hate that it's called the same thing, for all of my CRM users. And there they could enter a question like, hey, I'm having trouble with this, or I would really love to be able to do this. And they can start to help each other. right? So people can start answering questions for their peers. It's a great place to put documentation, put videos, things like that. So it's a great way to encourage collaboration through the users themselves. So how do you stay up to date with what is going on in the, within Microsoft and the updates that they're doing? So to stay current, you'll probably want to ditch outdated tools. I think the easiest one is the Outlook client. I know some people are still using it, especially if you're on-prem. You can use the Outlook app with an on-prem environment, so you might want to look into doing that. So ditch some of those things that are maybe, older tools or Microsoft's not supporting as much, and use some of those newer features. Test those new features and incorporate them into the process. So this is where a dev environment is going to become really handy. You can take one of those features in a wave, put it into the process, see how it's going to work out, and really get that out to your users. And then also keep an environment with the out-of-the-box forms. So one of the things I said earlier is to always do a copy of those out-of-the-box forms and edit the copy, and keep the out-of-the-box one as is. Because Microsoft is going to make changes and updates to it that that might impact what you're doing. So having an environment with those out-of-the-box forms to test is great, because then you can see what Microsoft is doing. There's a lot of resources out there. XRM Toolbox, I have brought that up a ton. It's awesome. The Maker portal is constantly updating. You sometimes still have to go to the legacy or the classic view to edit, but the Maker portal is releasing new features like the plan designer and generative pages. If you haven't used that yet, please do. It's really cool. I really got to explore that last week, and it's pretty cool stuff. And then the more and more the admin center is adding things in there. Follow the official Microsoft channels. Microsoft is on LinkedIn, it's on Twitter or X. They're even on Instagram, which is kind of crazy, and Threads. Follow them. They put out things, new features, they have articles, but they'll also tell you if something's down and something's not working. MVPs are also great to follow. Some of them have blogs, podcasts, or they just write articles. Maybe they put out a daily tip. Great way to get information on new features and how to stay up to date. And then also use Microsoft support. They have a way to get bugs onto a list for the product team to fix. And so if you've found a bug, make sure you reach out to them so they can get it added to that list. And then the community, we talked about this in the beginning, this is an awesome place to grow your knowledge and connect with other people. I've said this, I don't know how many times, but I wouldn't be here or where I am today without the community. I've made some of my closest friends, some of my closest friends are in the community. Malcolm said we've known each other for years. I do a podcast with Ed, who I've met through the community. And so reaching out and participating in those user groups, the meetups, you're already here, right? So congrats, you're involved in the community. There are forums, there are events, virtual and in person. Connect with partners and ISVs. You can reach out and talk to a partner without having to pay for their sources, right? Or, you know what I mean? So obviously at some point, there's going to be something where you have to engage with them. But if you're at an event, stop by their booth and ask them a question. Hey, I'm running into this problem. Like, how would you guys solve for it? At the end of the day, we all want everyone to be successful. We want everyone to be able to customize or configure the system effectively. And so it's a really cool community where everyone wants you to succeed. Learning and sharing. Microsoft Learn is a great place. It's so large and really scary, but it is a great place to find documentation, especially now that it's open source. Microsoft's not the only one maintaining it. We are actually, as the community, can help maintain it so we can update it. Post questions. So yeah, it's great to consume the information, go through and see what other people have asked. But if you have a question, put it out there. Have somebody answer it. Trust me, there is no such thing as a stupid question. There's always going to be somebody else. I'm guessing if you have the question, at least 10, 15, 20 other people have the question as well. And they're just too scared to ask it. So put your question out there or answer a question. If somebody has put something in a forum and you know the answer, provide it. You're going to contribute to that community. The community is only as good as the people that are in it. And then you have resources. Obviously, Doug is a great resource for here. Doug has a lot of events. They do have a forum on their website. I think a lot of people don't know that it's there, but they do have a forum where you can interact and ask questions. Microsoft, in addition to Microsoft Learn, also does have a community where you can ask questions. And then, of course, have to say you can use AI tools, but be very cautious with them. I can't tell you how many times I've told Copilot that it has given me wrong instructions on how to do something because I was like, hey, this doesn't quite seem right. And after some Googling, it is in fact not correct. So make sure you use it, but also validate. All right, so to kind of wrap up, just some things that we talked about is you want to plan before you build. You want to validate the documentation, and you want to use, favor those out of the box features. You want to design for scalability. Make sure that it's going to be something that can be updated or upgraded, and really think about your naming conventions. Build smart. It is much better to hold off on a go live and make sure that your users are ready and that the system is ready. And make sure that you get an admin before it's too late. Respond calmly. I think this is probably one of the hardest things is when somebody else panics, the first thing you want to do is panic. Really try to remain calm, understand the problem, keep them calm, and really make sure that you're setting the pace of the resolution. You want to streamline support in a way where you're, reporting, you have templates, whether that's SharePoint, maybe building something into the system. You want to train your users on how to report issues and how to maybe do some of that troubleshooting themselves first. Make sure you have a way to protect your data quality. You want to make sure that the system has good data, otherwise nobody's going to trust it and they're not going to use it. So whatever that may be, if it's integrations, if it's an ISV tool, there's a lot of cool things out there you can do to really help with your data. Make sure you are using automation, like business rules, Power Automate, even workflows. I'm going to say that dirty word of using workflows within Dynamics itself. I still think there's a huge use case for those. So make sure that you are automating when and where necessary. And then also invest in your people. Invest in training, invest in the community. Make sure that admins have the time to continue to learn, right? There's always something new out there, and the learning never stops. And so make sure that as an admin, you're taking time for yourself to get out there, to learn, to ask questions. Training is part of, or education is part of your job, right? Take a couple hours a week and, scroll through some boards or forums or blogs and make sure that you're staying up to date. All right, that is everything I had planned for today. Please connect with me on LinkedIn if you're not already. Would love to continue talking. If you can't tell, I get really passionate about this stuff. I love Dynamics and I love to talk about it. So please connect with me. Thank you so much for all of you. Are there any questions, any comments?
We got a question from Demi.
Yeah. I think, Richard, you spoke up, or was it Robert first?
I did. We got a question from Demi. She's got a hand up. So Demi, feel free to jump in. You're on mute right now.
I saw in the comments, Demi said they had a drop. So maybe they just accidentally hit the raise hand. Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Okay. Well, Thank you so much, Ashley. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks very much. That was a great presentation.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for joining. I know Malcolm had to drop, but yeah, connect with me. Would love to continue talking. Let me know if there's any questions, and I hope to be back. Anything else we need to do to close things out?
That's it.
Nothing else.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.